the social circles that we grow up in. We're learning all about conflict, how it was dealt with, how it wasn't dealt with. We have got societal norms which say, don't say this, don't interfere that, don't rock the boat. We've all these different ones. Don't go in like a hothead. Anger is negative, and all of this stuff.
Welcome back, everybody. Chris G here, Hard Hat, the CEO, and today we're going to talk about some leadership stuff, mainly with conflict. And to help me do that, I've got a gentleman all the way from Maryland. It's Irvine Nugent, and Irvin is an expert when it comes to leadership and conflict. Irvin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Chris. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Glad you're here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And I got a few questions for you.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I'm originally from Northern Ireland, which is kind of important because I grew up, and my generation was called a child of the Troubles. We grew up there with all the troubles that you may have heard in the back of your mind growing up. And I grew up in conflict. And so people say, well, why did you get into that work? And that's important for that. But I live in Maryland, and I run a company called Conflict EQ. And primarily, we focus on issues of leadership as it intersects with conflict. And we do a lot of coaching and training around that. And we have found that in many businesses, this is an Achilles heel. And it is impacting performance and impacting outcomes. And it's become a sweet spot for us.
So we talk about all kinds of conflict, like between personnel, between leadership. Is it all the above?
All of the above, yeah.
Yeah.
Mainly, I find that when you intersect and you boil down most of the conflict we're talking about, it's interpersonal. It's about conversations that happened yet or should have happened, or conversations that broke down. And what we try and do, Chris, is intervene before the breakdown is severe, because the last thing you want is, you don't want this becoming a legal case. You don't want this going into official arbitration, etc. So much of the conflict, if addressed early, can actually be mediated.
How much of it affects the size of the company you're in?
Well, I think, first of all, conflict is a part of humanity. Where there are two people gathered, there will be conflict. So no matter the size of your company, you will deal with conflict. Now, one of the pervasive things about conflict is that it seeps through an organization. It's not just about two people having an organization. There's a systemic impact of that. So the larger the organization, that is going to ripple through the whole organization. So if you think that it's just two people and that's kind of confined to both of them, you're actually wrong. It's actually going to, people feel it. They feel the tension. They feel the emotion in the air. So the larger the organization, and you have, say, multiple conflicts going on, that is going to seep through and be felt in the whole organization.
You know, I always talk about communication, but what's the best way to deal with conflict?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, you know, what you said is communication is what we turn to. It's just poor communication. And that's partly true. But one of the things I like to say as well, it's not just communication, but it's in these moments of pressure and tension and threat that somehow we lose our capacity. And just think about it. We have a lot of different conversations every day. Most of them are very easy. There's no problem. But when you add pressure to a conversation, when there's feedback that has to be given, or something, or we feel threatened in a conversation, all of a sudden the skills which we seem to have access to dissipate and collapse. So for us, it's not just a communication issue, because there are communication issues you can learn, but it's also a capacity issue. What I mean by that is, how do I function under pressure? And can I train myself to function a little better under pressure, especially in these important conversations?
Is conflict more perspective then?
Is conflict more, sorry?
A perspective, or like how you view things?
It is, yes. So obviously the story we're telling ourselves, how we view it, is a critical element of that. And so conflict involves, first of all, our own, what I would say, cognitive story. What story are we making up about this? But it's also our emotional impact, like as the emotions arise, how we dealing with those. And then there's a dynamic element as well, is how we are interpreting another person's emotions and their stories as well. So there is a lot about perspective and being able, I think, to take ourselves out of a perspective that has become set and has become our story.
Now, conflict can go two ways. So you're talking about how you deal with conflict, but how do you deal with somebody else who has a perceived conflict, I guess, with you or somebody else for that matter?
Yeah, so
Is that how you see people?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because sometimes we can be totally unaware that that person has conflict with us, or something we said or done has created tension, and so I think conflict, first of all, has to, before it bubbles up and becomes, say, a conflict between two people, I think there's an incident that happens that makes it, what I say, break the water, that it comes out and all of a sudden there's an incident and two people involved. So I think it is partly a self-education about what's happening within me, and how do I deal with another person as well who has intense emotions, who has a different perspective, and how do I learn to dialogue with them? So I think it is both and.
I think it sounds like a little story time. Do you have any stories where you've had to, I guess?
So people ask me, well, how did this become the center of your work? And in my late 30s, early 40s, I got a dream job. I was invited to become a CEO of a rather large nonprofit, about 500 people. And of course, you go into that with a lot of excitement, and I want to change things, and I want to do things, and actually, I kind of thought I was doing a good job. I thought I was kind of in touch with myself. I thought I was listening to people, and everything was great, until one day, about 5 months into it, Jim, this guy, who was probably one of the star employees, the kind of person you wanted to build a company around, comes to my office, looks me in the face, and says, "I quit," and hit me like I didn't know where that was coming from. And I said, "Why?" And he said, "I'm tired of working in an organization that won't address problems up front." And in many ways, he was addressing an issue, but he was really indicting my leadership, that because the buck stops with me. And so in a way, what he was saying is, we're not really facing difficult issues. And that hit hard. And we lost him. The company had to go through a really expensive rehiring and trying to find someone. And as I reflected upon that incident, Chris, I said to myself, it wasn't because I was doing something bad. I really wanted the company to run well. I wanted people to have a great culture. But I think because I was so intent on that, I was also avoiding, perhaps, if I was honest with myself, some of the difficult conversations that needed to happen. I was afraid of what would happen if relationships broke down. I was afraid of what would happen if all of a sudden there was, say, a breakdown in communication. Things were said that couldn't be unsaid. And that started me on a journey. It started me on a journey to really be honest and to, first of all, recognize that I had a conflict problem, that I was an avoider, that, and I used wonderful language around things. I used to say, well, they'll sort it out. Or, it's not right, just not the right time yet. And all of it was an excuse for delay to really get into the meat of the conversation. And so initially I started being a little more courageous. I got myself some coaching around the topic, and I started being more courageous. And what I found is that what people really crave is clarity. And what people really crave is airing some of these difficult topics. And that if I can be brave enough to go there, that's what creates a better culture.
I can feel that. So you were aware of some of the conflicts, but you were trying to avoid the conversation. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes. And I would cover it up with beautiful language, like, well, that's not the right time for me to intervene or whatever. And I had all the right, excuses, but they were there, and it was obvious because I felt it, and I just didn't want to get involved.
I remember, it's been a long time ago, that I had a phone, somebody asked me a question, and they asked me a question that wasn't any of their business. But instead of telling them it wasn't any of their business or being polite about it and saying, no, I'm not at liberty to say, yeah, I avoided the question.
Yeah. And
the person implied that I didn't know anything about it or something. Then she found out that I did know something about it. And she came to me, so and they were upset with me. And this has been, I'm learning from this mistake. And it wasn't that I lied, but I didn't basically express the truth either. I just kind of avoided it. And she goes, well, next time, just tell me. I said, okay. And from then on, I've just told people, I am not at liberty. I cannot discuss that anymore, or something to that effect. And it's a conflict that I couldn't, I didn't want to say it's none of your business, because it wasn't, but there's times where you just got to say, I just can't tell you. Or in your case, there's times where you just have to address it and talk to people about things.
Yes, absolutely. You can't, there's only so much sweeping under the rug you can do, because all of a sudden, it comes out, and it comes out worse. And here's what I've learned. If you don't deal with something early, it doesn't go away. It stays and it festers. And when it comes out more ugly, more aggressive, and you could save yourself so much pain by really addressing it earlier in the whole cycle.
Let's say that you talked about you took some coaching and you coach people like this now. So what's some things that you teach people to stay grounded? And I'm looking at my notes there. I see a lot about emotional intelligence. How do you stay in control, I guess, and not get fearful and stuff like that?
I think, first of all, I think it's important to recognize the business environment we're in. It's pretty brutal. I mean, we are in an environment of constant change. We're in an environment where nothing can be given anymore, where there is staff shortages, all of the pressures. And to pretend that is not impacting how I show up day in and out is just a fallacy. So that's really, first of all, I think we have to understand that we are under, especially leaders in today, are under immense pressure. And that's impacting their reactivity. It's impacting. So if you're on this constant strain, it's important to realize that all of a sudden you can notice things like you make comments and they're just a little sharper. The tone is off. You're tired. You're at your wit's end with certain things. And so I think the first step therefore is just a little bit more self-awareness of really, I talk to you, be kind to yourself. This is a difficult environment. And so then the second thing then is once we realize that, it's to recognize some of your patterns. What are your trigger points? What gets you going? What gets you emotionally triggered? Because as human beings, most of us follow different patterns. Maybe it's a certain type of personality. Maybe it's an answer. Maybe it's someone who talks over it. Whatever it is, what are you noticing? And then to have some default practical exercises to do in the moment that can just give us a little bit of space, so that instead of saying the first thing out of our mouth, that we're able either to call a little time out or to nuance that and to be a little more, say, curious or ask a question rather than say something, a demonstrative statement. I always say in the coaching process that curiosity is your friend, and that if we can put on a curiosity hat and to ask a few more really great questions, it can really change the tone of any conversation.
Is that part of the play we already decided that, conflict goes both ways and how we handle ourselves. How do we respect those or make them feel respected when there is a conflict? And conflict means I'm assuming means that somebody's in a disagreement with you or with something,
Absolutely.
a policy or something. So how do we handle that so that somebody doesn't blow up themselves and say, I quit, because it's something they're not agreeing with at some point.
Yep.
But they have to understand that you're still the boss. And while I hear you and understand that, a decision has to be made and we have to move forward.
Yeah. I think the important thing, first thing I would say, is people want to be heard. Now, just because you hear someone doesn't mean you agree with them. But I think it's really important is that people feel heard. So a few questions so someone comes to you and you're kind of scratching your head. Where is that person coming from? Are you on planet Earth here? And just like something to say to them, tell me a little more about that. Or just something simple like, what's your perspective, or what don't I know about this? But sometimes we'll go in thinking we know the story, we know all the facts, and maybe we don't. And it just gives an opportunity for someone to kind of, and to do that in a tone that is calm. And very often, if someone's come to us a little bit hot, to really kind of lower the tone and kind of ask a curious conversation and just let them talk. And that can begin a conversation around it. And then you can give, well, can I share my perspective? And so then you share your perspective. And then, as a boss, I say, well, this is it. This is the standards, at times. This is the way it needs to be done. But I think being able to kind of open the door to a more generative conversation, I think is a really important skill.
Now, you implied it, but you didn't say it. So I want to make sure everybody hears it. You need to listen as well.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the things I was bad at it, and I've taught myself, and even actually being a podcaster now, I have to listen to my guest because you're going to know if I'm not paying attention. You're going to know, and I don't do it anymore because I don't have to, but I used to have to sit on my hands.
Yeah.
Because I want to do something and I would get distracted. It's like, I need to focus on what this person's telling me, whether I agree with it or not, and be able to respect them, but understand from where they're coming from. Because sometimes that helps, at least with me, it helps. If I understand where they're coming from, I can give them a response or help them see it my way once I understand how they're perceiving it.
Yeah.
And I guess, God gave us 2 ears and one mouth. So
yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah. And Chris, I would say as well, is that's probably one of the biggest disconnects between our self-awareness and reality. And, I'll do a training. I'll say to people, how many people here consider them great leaders? Most people will raise their hand. I'm a great leader. Yeah, and yet, I'm sorry. But yet the reality is, look at how much competition there is for our attention. We've got cell phones, we've got pads, we've got this, we've got the other. Our attention span has gone down so much in the past couple of years. And then you add the busyness of work. Boy, it's hard to really carve out a moment when you can truly listen. But let me tell you, if you do that, the felt experience of that is something amazing. Because it happens so rarely. We rarely feel that people are listening to us. We are in conversation now, and we assume that people are distracted. So if you come with your full attention, the quality of that presence is so much different. It's felt differently. And if that's a skill we can bring to any difficult conversation, it's going to help that conversation.
You mentioned, just our attention span. And I've noticed I don't watch a lot of YouTube, but when I do, I realize I look at the amount of time for that video. Do I want to commit 10 minutes of my time to watch this video? Yeah. And sometimes nope, not worth it. And I'll watch a 3-minute video. Yeah. And it's just skip. And that's the same type of things that we're dealing with. And we're training not only us, our children too. And that's just a different world we're in. So paying attention is...
Chris, and I wonder, does that come out in conversations at work as well? It's kind of like in YouTube, it's so easy to next. And it's just, you hear someone comes to you and say, oh, I heard that before. And, you're kind of almost moved on. You haven't engaged and you've kind of gone into this pattern, and it's so easy to do. It's so easy to do.
I was reading my notes here before you came on, and I got to remembering a conversation I used to have and one of my, colleagues, supervisors, or whatever, his comment was, I hear you. Mm-hmm. And my always thought was, no, you don't. But you're just telling me that to make me feel better. So I want my listeners to think that if you are truly listening, don't tell somebody you had to listen. Or somebody will tell me, I'm not going to lie to you. Well, I'm a landlord, and I've got a lot of renters, and I've heard them all. Yeah. All the stories and lies and incredible situations you come into. You don't have to tell me you're not going to lie to me, because the first thing I hear is when you say, I hear you, or I'm going to tell you the truth, is I think that you're trying to reassure me that you're doing that. And I don't have to. Your actions speak louder than your words.
Absolutely. And you don't have to say anything. If you're because we're not only listening to the words, we're looking at the nonverbals. And very often people forget that. Or no, we can say things, I hear you, and our nonverbals are screaming that I'm not engaged in this conversation, or I don't trust you, or whatever. And so, to really, people are very attuned to the consistency of both our verbal and our nonverbal. And that's really important.
So when people come to you for some help, are they serious about it? Are they required, somebody said you need to go get some help?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a little bit of both, to be honest. I have some people come who You know, I have to say this. Most people spend a lot of time during the day and in their lives at work. And the last thing they want is for that to be a horrible experience. Most people don't want to go to work and feel tension. Most people don't want to go to work and not be able to have a conversation or hate the person that they have to work with. That's not a comfortable situation. So I actually find that what I encounter more of is people who are a little bit what should I say skeptical that they can change. You know, it's kind of like people think, well, this is the way it is, you know, and so people are tired and they think, you know, I'm in this situation, it's not going to change. And so initially, I think part of that is really helping people understand that they have more power over a situation than they think they have. And then the second one is what you're referring to. People come because they have to tick a box. I was sent here because I have to deal with this. And that's not the ideal coaching situation. You know, the worst thing, the first
Not
person,
really, no.
the person that doesn't want to be coached. But I think then, you know, I think it's amazing what can happen in a few sessions with just listening to the person. And just, you know, like, tell me what happened from your perspective. What's going on? Digging a little bit deeper. There's some assessments that we do. Great assessment. I use the conflict dynamic profile, which gives people an overview of how they react in conflict. And that can be really eye-opening for people. And all of a sudden they start thinking, well, that's really interesting. And people begin to engage. So I think either, you know, there are a few people I've coached where it's just they have checked out. Where I find the most difficult one, Chris, is someone who's just about to retire. He's got 6 months left. Say that's a really difficult case because then the person really has checked out mentally, emotionally, and they're not going to change. They're just clicking the
Short-term disease. Yeah.
Short timer and
down.
Yeah, they're, I think, are the most difficult. But then the thing I say to them is, look, you've got a conflict at work and you're not interested in solving it. But I bet you when you retire, you leave, you're going to have conflicts with your family, with friends, etc. So you can use these sessions we have that will help your life overall. And that's interesting because then some say, okay, then maybe.
Now, this is a podcast for entrepreneurs, CEOs, and, you know, being that CEO of your company. And while you might have some conflicts, obviously, because you're in charge, but how do you see and address conflict between some of your people?
So first of all, I think there's a balance. A CEO has a balance, and the balance is we want to be, and there's a little saying I have, we don't want to mesh ourselves in the conflict. So we don't want as a CEO to be the referee in every conflict. We want people to be able to manage their own conflict. So we want to be, you know, close enough to influence, but distant enough as well to let people manage their own conflict. So I think that's a balance as well. I think we can go both ways. I think as a CEO, we can get too involved and we can kind of begin to become the referee. Now, that doesn't mean that then you don't get involved. What I think it is that I think you bring the two people in and you say, this is a conflict. It's impacting the organization. It's had ripple effects. And how are we going to manage this? This is not my responsibility. It's your responsibility. And kind of put the onus on them that it's their responsibility to solve this. Now, you may provide them help. You may provide them whatever, but it's their responsibility, not the CEO's. Because I think that's the nearest thing to burnout is if you feel every conflict is your responsibility and you have to solve it. And then the second thing is to notice when you should intervene, to notice a situation which has bigger impact and that is not being addressed, and then to intervene and say, okay, this has to be addressed.
Well, that reminds me of a story, and I'm actually feel pretty good about it because you're telling me I think I did the right thing. Had two department managers, and they were, I wouldn't say necessarily, well, I would say they're hot-headed. They were, but they had to work together because each department was relying on the other.
Yeah.
And I heard that they were having a little spat. They've not the first time, but it's been happening a couple of times, and I've been hearing about it. And one day I heard about it, and I was kind of tired of it because they got figured out. So I called them into my office, right before lunchtime. And I sat them down. I didn't say anything. I just reached in my pocket and I pulled out my credit card. And I handed it to one of them. I said, "You all go to lunch. And y'all figure it out. Don't come back till it's all solved.
Mhm.
I don't want to see you all today until it's solved."
Yeah.
And they took about an hour and a half, which was fine. I basically, I didn't want to see them. You don't come back here until you all got this worked out. And they come back. I said, "I want the receipt." And they brought me the receipt. And it all worked out well. They whatever it was, they resolved it. And I kind of had an idea, but it wasn't for me to decide. They had to work together as departments.
Yeah.
And
And I think that's really important whenever you are confident in the ability of each of those people to work it out. I think that's great because it just signals, it's not my responsibility. I'm not responsible for your relationship. However, the other thing is, and I think this is important, we're never taught how to deal with conflict. When you think about how we grow up, when you think about, I like to say, we have a conflict story. And so we're as we grow up, we're looking at our family, we're looking at the social circles that we grow up in. We're learning all about conflict, how it was dealt with, how it wasn't dealt with. We have got societal norms, which says, don't say this, don't interfere that, don't rock the boat. We've all these different ones. Don't go in like a hothead. Anger is negative, and all of this stuff. And so we bring that, and no one really teaches us how to deal in an effective way with conflict. And so it's not surprising, therefore, that people really struggle in bringing some resolution and having effective strategies. And I think that's what we're encountering as well.
Now, you told me a story before we go, I guess. I want to hear. You told me a story of how you got into this, that somebody come in and was frustrated and said, "I quit." Can you give me some success stories that this has all resolved itself, either through some training or just better conflict resolution, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, let me tell you a story, a kind of a similar one of a client then who I was working with. And it resonated very, very well with me because they were a little bit of an avoider. They were very good-hearted. They wanted the organization to do well. They wanted a thriving culture, but they had an averse relationship with conflict. And as we broke that down, it was all they thought, well, in team meetings, you can cross a line. If you cross that line, things are said, and that's just it. It poisons the relationship.
Yeah.
And I said, probably in a team meeting, things will cross the line, but that's okay because that's part of knowing where the line is.
Well, it means they're passionate too.
Absolutely. And it's not about the line. It's when the line is crossed to recognize and go, oh, wait a minute. Okay, let's just recalibrate here. And so we did some training around that. We did some self-awareness and I kind of, I want you to be brave. I want you to be courageous. I want you to feel that moment when you're holding back and then step in. And they did it tentatively. And then after a while, it became more of a habit. And I think the feedback that she brought me was this. He said, we're having different conversations. I said, tell me more. I said, I'm noticing that because I'm a little more courageous, people are catching that. And people now are beginning to call out things that they wouldn't have called out before. When we come to make a decision, people are being a little more, things that are difficult are being said about this decision. And I said, I think we're making better decisions. In fact, I know we're making better decisions. And I think that's what's possible. When you open the door to these types of conversations, then that's the thing. Conflict is not always negative. I like to say, conflict is difference, it's perspectives and values, etc. That we differ from another person, and that becomes in an interpersonal space a blockage to communication. But it also can be a space where there is ingenuity, a space where there's creativity, a space where we can create better decisions because we're willing to question, we're willing to clarify what's really the core issue.
Last question. Does it become easier once you get your fear goes away as you become more, not assertive, but you address those things that You should become used to it, I guess.
So I'm going to be very honest. I grew up as a conflict avoider. I like to say we have a home base, and
Yeah.
some of us go in hot, and that's our home base, and that's the way we react to tension. Some of us, like me, we pull back a little bit. So I don't think that innately changes, but what does change is that we notice it, we know what's happening, and then our experience tells us, you know what? This is just a reaction to threat. I don't need to feel threatened. I can deal with this and I can go in. And so I think that's what's become easier for me, is that I recognize it and I know that I can intervene without all these horrible things I've been telling myself.
Thank you, Irvin. If somebody has some conflict issues, how would they best get hold of you?
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me. I'm pretty active in LinkedIn under my name. Our website is called constructively.com. There's a wonderful free assessment there if you want to diagnose a little conflict you might be in at the moment. And I also do some YouTube work.
Awesome. We'll make sure those links are in the bottom of the show notes.
Thank you.
I do appreciate your time today, Irvin, very much.
Thank you, Chris. Enjoyed it.
All right, guys, this is Chris G with Irvin at Hard Hat the CEO. You guys go out and try to not avoid conflict, but resolute it as possible. God be with you till we meet again. This is Chris G again. Bye-bye.